Last Life, the renowned sequel to the Minecraft SMP Third Life, has finally reached its end after the 9 weeks of iconic moments, deaths, and ultimate chaos. Last Life was definitely a well-deserved sequel to Third Life, and the events that happened with each session will never be forgotten. If you don't know what Last Life is, it's a Minecraft mini SMP where each person has a certain amount of lives before dying permanently on the server. Now, I won't be explaining much of how it worked since I already made a video about that, so if you're a bit confused on what this SMP is about, I'd recommend watching that video before this one. Now, even though Last Life had so many iconic deaths, life trading, and the events that correlated to them, the order and count of deaths during each session can easily be confusing since the mechanics were much more complex than Third Life, and there was a lot to take in for each session. But I've recorded every death, life trade, and boogeyman kill that ever happened on Last Life, so if you really want to get a further understanding of the events that played out throughout the season, this video will definitely help you. Now, I'm not going to summarize the entire plot of the season because there are way too many important things that happened, and I don't want to retell literally everything, so I'm only going to focus on each Last Lifer's death, how they died, and every life trade, as well as each boogeyman and their kills. I'll be doing this with a chart of each person, with each heart representing a life. This video does contain spoilers for Last Life, so if you haven't watched the series yet, but are planning to, I'd recommend to probably click off. Anyways, let's start off with the first session of Last Life. Last Life started out with 17 members, all who came from its predecessor, Third Life, with the exception of 3. The initial life roll played out, giving each member a random amount of lives. Grian got 2, Mumbo Jumbo got 4, Good Times with Scar got 6, Beatable got 4, Tango Tech got 6, Impulse SV got 3, Rendog got 2, Etho got 4, Zombie Cleo got 2, Pearl got 6, Smager got 2, Solidarity got 2, Smalsh Beans got 5, LD Shadow Lady got 4, In the Littlewood got 4, Skizzleman got 3, and Big B Stats got 3. What was so interesting was that many people were assigned 2 lives. The server started and people quickly started gathering basic resources and making alliances. Then the first boogeyman was chosen, and this boogeyman was B-Dubs. The task of the boogeyman was that they had to kill someone before the end of the session, or else they'd immediately turn red. B-Dubs had to choose a victim, but he didn't do it so early. The first change of lives on the server happened as a life trade, a very stupid one to say the least. Grian tricked Scar into giving him a life after wanting to test out the new life trading feature. After finding out he had 6 lives to start with, Grian just ran away, leaving Scar furious. Now Scar had 5 lives and Grian had 3. This glee of 3 lives did not last long for Grian, however, as shortly after, B-Dubs finally decided to kill a victim, and he chose Grian. Grian was back at 2 lives, and Scar was even more furious. Later on throughout the season, many more life trading happened, and all of it was related to Tango. Tango had created a life gambling game called You Bet Your Life, where someone would have to give in their life and bet on who would turn red first. If they guessed correctly, they would get every given life of the contestants who entered. Tango originally managed to get 3 members to participate. The first one was Smalsh Beans, aka Joel, who bet on Solidarity, aka Jimmy. Next up were B-Dubs and Etho. B-Dubs also bet on Jimmy, and Etho bet on Cleo. To be fair, Jimmy was the first to lose all of his lives last season. Joel now had 4 lives, and B-Dubs and Etho had 3. Because of this, Tango being the keeper of lives got to a whopping 9 lives. This was actually the most amount of lives a member had throughout the entire season. The first session ended off with Pearl giving a life to Smager, aka Scott, leaving her at 5 and him at 3. So in all, these were the new life changes after this session. Scar was now at 5, Joel was now at 4, B-Dubs and Etho were now at 3, Scott was now up to 3, Pearl was now at 5, and Tango was now at 9 lives. The second session of Last Life had many unexpected events, and it was much more chaotic than predicted. So many deaths happened, all because of one person, Joel. The session started off with a life trading exercise that the Southerners Alliance had to gain each other's trust. Mumbo volunteered to pass around his life, passing it to Impulse, then to In the Littlewood, aka Martin, then to Grian, then to Jimmy, and back to Mumbo. For this session, instead of 1 boogeyman, 2 were chosen, which were Scar and Joel. Tango and Cleo made a deal which included Tango giving a life to Cleo. Then the first 3 deaths of the session happened, all in a very short time period. The first one was when Mumbo died in lava when trying to raid a bastion in the Nether. The second and third were an incident with the boogeyman. Joel tried to kill Lizzie but ended up falling into his own trap, and Lizzie, escaping with only half a heart, died to a zombie. So, Tango gave a life to Cleo, Mumbo got down to 3 lives, Joel also got down to 3 lives, and same with Lizzie. Things still didn't look good for Joel after this, as he and Scar attempted to cure their boogeyman curses again, this time trying to trap one of the Southerners. With the plan failing, Joel had no choice but to attack, but failed and was killed by Mumbo, who was then killed by Scar, who is now free of the boogeyman curse. Joel, on the other hand, still had to get a kill somehow. Meanwhile, Tango continued his gambling business and got Lizzie to enter, who bet on Joel, seeing how unfortunate he's been this session. So, Joel lost yet another life, and so did Mumbo, leaving both at 2, and Lizzie now got Tango back up to 9. This time, Joel tried going to Scott and Pearl's base. Finally, he was able to kill Scott to free the curse, but literally right after that, he was killed by Pearl in self-defense. Poor Joel, he lost 3 lives this session, and now he's the first one to become a bloodthirsty, death-wielding red life. However, now since Joel got down to his last life, this meant that Lizzie won You Bet Your Life. Tango, keeping his promise, gave all 4 lives to Lizzie, leaving her up at 6. After the incidents with Joel, things started to settle down. Pearl gave another life to Scott after his murder, getting him back up to 3, and Lizzie decided to use her rewards for good. She started by making a deal with Ren, giving a life to him, and then giving a life to both Scott and Pearl each, in return for the one and only enchanter on the server. So, Pearl gave a life to Scott, and Lizzie gave a life to Ren, as well as to Scott and Pearl. These were the life changes of this session. Mumbo was now at 2, Ren, Lizzie, and Cleo were now at 3, Scott was now up to 4, Tango was now down to 5, and Joel was now down to only 1 life left. Following the events of the previous season, the third season wasn't as chaotic. In fact, not many life changes happened during this session at all. The Southerners started off with their life passing routine, this time starting with Martin's life. Martin's life was passed to Grian, then Mumbo, then Impulse, then Jimmy, and then back to Martin. The boogeyman of this session was Lizzie. She successfully lured in Pearl to kill her, freeing her of the curse. Scar, slowly becoming the merchant of the server, was finally able to get back his 6th life, making a deal with Ren. So, Pearl was down to 4, and Ren was now down to 2 as he gave his life to Scar, making him back up to 6. Even though this session wasn't that chaotic, the next session had some very surprising deaths. The session started off yet again with the Southerners doing their ritual. Yeah, I'm gonna call it a ritual at this point. Impulse's life was passed to Mumbo, then Martin, then Grian, then Jimmy, and back to Impulse. Just like session 2, this session had 2 boogeymen, Rendog and Big B. The first life change happened when B-Dubs gave his life to Scar for the enchanter, now leaving him at 7 whole lives. Unfortunately, Impulse had to leave midway through this session. Then the first death of the session occurred with Ren needing to cure himself of the boogeyman curse. He set up a pretty neat trap in his tower, a hidden deep hole where he brought Skizzle to fall down after blowing the ground up. Only moments after Ren's boogie kill, Big B pulled probably one of the most heartbreaking boogeyman betrayal kills on the server. In panic, he killed Cleo, who was his closest ally on the server. Cleo was obviously very furious and never forgave him. So, Scar was now up to 7 lives, and B-Dub, Skiz, and Cleo were now at 2. The next death of the session, however, was probably one of the most unexpected. You see, last session, Joel, being a red life, tried to get a red life kill so bad, but failed with every single trap he made. But now, Joel finally got the kill he deserved. He shot Grian off Mumbo's gas farm when they were in the middle of working on it, leaving Grian dead. He was now, just like Joel, on his last life. It was pretty unexpected because Grian had so many plans with the Southerners, but they all had to go so quickly. Cleo was the next to get on her last life that session, dying to one of Joel's traps. With this red power, I think you can tell who she had in mind to kill. After it seemed like everything had settled to an end of the session, another person had gone to the last life as well, and this time it was B-Dubs, who fell to his death in a nether fortress. Now, Grian, Cleo, and B-Dubs were all on their last life. In summary of this session, Skiz was now at 2 lives, Scar was at 7, and Grian, Cleo, and B-Dubs all at 1 life. There are now 4 red lives on last life, but things seemed to get resolved during the next session, all thanks to one person. Unfortunately, Tango was absent this session, so only 16 members played today. The session started off with the Southerners' usual life trading ritual, but this time something shocking happened. Martin passed his life to Jimmy, but instead of passing it to the next person, Jimmy just ran off with it. Martin eventually caught up to him and got his life back, and that was the last of their weekly routine. The boogeyman of this session was Etho, and we all know Etho is very scary. Following the tragedies of the last session, Scar decided to finally open up his soul-selling business where he'd give lives to people in need. Scar started off the first deal with B-dubs helping him back up to 2 lives, but literally a second after, Etho decided to kill Scar to remove his boogie curse, leaving Scar at 5 lives now. Scar still went out with his deals as he gave a life to Cleo, making her back at 2, and Scar at 4. Meanwhile, Martin secretly gave a life to Ren for their secret Shadow Alliance. So, Scar gave a life to B-dubs, then died to Etho, then gave a life to Cleo, and Martin gave a life to Ren. Scar finished off his business by selling 2 lives to both Grian and Joel, which meant that there were no more red lives on the server. But this also meant that Scar was now on only 2 lives. Even though Scar seemed like the hero here, things weren't going well for him after this, as he died to one of the Southerners' traps when they specifically told him about it. Scar was now on his last life. The session ended off with Scott giving a life to Cleo. So, Scar gave a life to both Grian and Joel, then died to a trap, and then Scott gave a life to Cleo. These were the life changes of this session. Martin, Ren, Scott, and Cleo were now all at 3 lives, while Grian, Joel, and B-dubs were up to 2, and Scar went all the way down to 1. This session was much different than the others because of the incredible chances of something unfortunate. The session started off with Scar, now at red, immediately trying to blow up Team Best, so Tango had to give him a life, so he's obliged to stop. Then the boogeymen were chosen, but this time, literally 6 were chosen, which was very, very rare. Mumbo, Etho, Joel, B-dubs, Scott, and Jimmy. Boogie kills immediately went down to business, with Mumbo killing B-dubs and Etho killing Mumbo right after, leaving both Mumbo and B-dubs at 1 life. Luckily for B-dubs, Tango supplied him with another life right after, putting him back to 2 once again. So, B-dubs went to red, then Mumbo went to red, then Tango gave a life to B-dubs. The next boogie kill attempt happened when Joel tried to kill Lizzie, but being horrible at boogeyman, ended up blowing himself up, leaving him back at 1 life. Meanwhile, B-dubs successfully got his boogie kill, but he killed Tango, who literally gave him a life. Tango was obviously very furious. After Joel's failure, he still then proceeded to kill Lizzie to cure himself, but it didn't really matter since he was already at red. So, Joel got back to red, Tango was killed by B-dubs, and Lizzie was killed by Joel. There were still 2 boogeymen out there, so Scott decided to kill Impulse, meanwhile Scar drowned by Scott's water elevator, leaving him back at 1 life again. Poor Scar. Jimmy also died when he accidentally died to Lizzie's base defense trap, leaving him at red as well. But Jimmy still wanted to get his boogie kill, so he killed Lizzie in revenge, but just like Joel, it didn't really matter. 2 more deaths happened this session, which were when Scott died to an ender pearl after escaping Mumbo and Joel, and Skiz getting ganged up on by the Reds. So, Impulse, Scar, Jimmy, and Lizzie all died, as well as Scott and Skiz. These were the life changes. Tango, Impulse, and Scott were now at 2 lives, while Mumbo, Joel, Scar, Jimmy, Lizzie, and Skiz were all on 1 life. Things didn't look like they could get more chaotic, but they did. Sadly, Scar couldn't make it to this session, and Pearl was chosen as the boogeyman. Things started off crazy when Mumbo killed Impulse the same way Joel killed Grian in session 4, leaving him at 1 life. Now things got real. Mumbo and Jimmy tried to trap Grian and Martin, so Grian had no choice but to kill both of them. Jimmy and Mumbo were now officially dead and out of the series. Unfortunately, Pearl had to leave midway through the session due to connection problems, so a new boogeyman was chosen, and this time it was Martin. He attempted to kill Grian, but right as he was about to get the kill, Joel stole it from him. Grian was now red, but Martin was still not cured. Meanwhile, things didn't look good for Big B as he was killed by Lizzie and then died to Pearl's old boogeyman trap. Skiz was the next to lose all of his lives, getting killed by Ren in self-defense. Martin finally got his boogie kill as he killed Tango, leaving him at 1 life. So, Grian was killed by Joel, Big B was killed by Pearl's trap and then Lizzie, Skiz was killed by Ren, and Tango was boogie killed by Martin. Things became even more chaotic after this when Grian spawned in the Wither. B-dubs died trying to fight it, while Impulse was final killed by Scott in self-defense during the Wither battle. 2 more final deaths happened after the Wither battle, when Lizzie was killed by B-Dubs as a deal with Etho, and B-Dubs was killed by Green shortly after for betraying the Reds. Now, Impulse, Lizzie, and B-Dubs were all out of the series. These were the life changes this session. Green, Tango, and Big B were now at 1, while Jimmy, Mumbo, Skiz, Impulse, Lizzie, and B-Dubs were now dead. I still find it crazy that 6 people lost their last life this session. With only few remaining non-Reds on the server, many people had targets on their backs. The boogeyman this session was Scott. The first death was a pretty pathetic one actually, which was when Etho was killed by a creeper. Yeah, a creeper. Pearl was the next to lose a life when she was killed by a skeleton after escaping from Scar, and Ren was then killed by Joel and Green. Then the most pathetic final death happened when Tango killed himself with his own trap. Death by stupidity as he calls it. So now Etho, Pearl, and Ren were all down 1 life, and Tango was out of the series. The remaining Reds still continued their hunt to take down the remaining Greens, with them killing Pearl once again, and Big B and Scar attempting to kill Ren. But unfortunately for them, it was all a trap, and Cleo killed Big B while Ren killed Scar. Shortly after that, Martin was blown up by Green and Joel with the trap, and Cleo was then killed by them as well. At the end of the session, Scott was turned to red because he failed to cure his boogeyman curse. So, Pearl was killed by Joel, Big B was killed by Cleo, Scar was killed by Ren, then Martin and Cleo were killed by Green and Joel, and then Scott was turned to red because of his boogeyman failures. These were the life changes this session. Etho, Ren, Pearl, Martin, and Cleo were all on 2 lives, while Scott was now on his last life, and Tango, Big B, and Scar were out of the series. At last, the final session of Last Life, the one that would determine the winner of the season. Pearl was chosen as the boogeyman this session, and she immediately got down to work as she killed Ren on the dance floor with TNT. Pearl was the next to turn red as she was killed by the other Reds. Then Cleo and Etho were next on the hit list, with Ren killing Cleo and Pearl killing Etho. Martin was now the last yellow life on the server, so he was ganged up on by the Reds and pushed off a cliff by Pearl, leading to his death. So, Ren was boogie killed by Pearl, Pearl was killed by the Reds, Cleo was killed by Ren, Etho was killed by Pearl, and Martin was pushed off a cliff. Now that all the remaining last lifers were on their last life, it was time for the real carnage to begin. Things happened so quickly as the battle unfolded between Green and Joel versus the other Reds. Cleo was killed by Joel while Green was killed by Scott. Then Etho was killed by Joel, which is pretty surprising to me, and Joel was killed by Scott right after. Cleo, Green, Etho, and Joel were now all dead. Thus, there were 4. The 4 remaining survivors decided to finish off each other with a battle royale. They'd each start from different sides of the map, run towards each other, and kill one another on sight. Ren and Pearl were the first to encounter each other, and Ren came out victorious for their duel. Ren and Scott had a long chase for a while, but Scott eventually went after Martin instead, and Martin tried to use a crystal, but it backfired, leaving him dead. Though it said in the chat that he was killed by Scott, so anyways, and then there were 2. Ren and Scott fought each other with tension and anxiety growing between each hit, but eventually Scott overpowered Ren, beating him to death with a zombie finishing him off. Scott was declared winner of Last Life, and then Green killed him with commands. Alright, that was Last Life, all 9 sessions of it. I hope you got a better understanding of each death, kill, and life trade, or maybe you're even more confused. So, who do you think truly won Last Life? Was it Scott, or was it, the zombie? In all, I love Last Life as a whole, and I'm pretty hyped up that Green said there may be a Season 3. I hope you feel the same way, and I guess we just have to wait. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye!